Hey, I'd like to introduce you to yourself. This is the Seeking Selfdom Going Deeper podcast, and I'm your host, Akello Stone.
I think we all experience self-doubt and fear of the unknown. The negative voice you referred to as shadow seems to come out of nowhere. Why does this occur in situations that are not fight or flight?
Shadow exists all the time. Shadow is, the combination and the accumulation of all the negative self-talk, the negative talk that other people have given us. People throughout our lives can praise us and they can denigrate us and they can build our character and they can strip away everything and leave us with low self-esteem. You hear a lot of people say they have low self-esteem. If someone says they have low self-esteem, I immediately think that they are listening to the shadow voice, which is not a voice of their own creation. We as beings do not create this idea of how can I destroy myself? How can I make myself feel miserable? What it is the accumulation of a lot of things that we've experienced in this subconscious realm that just becomes personified in a way as a voice. And when I speak of a voice, it's not a voice, for example, that you can kind of hear language with. It's really a voice. It's an idea. It's an ideation that may become kind of an internal dialogue. I mean, when you have a dialogue with yourself, are you seeing the words? Are you hearing the words? Are you just knowing the words and their meaning? So we want to start by just deconstructing what this voice where this voice comes from, what's it made of, and should I ignore the voice? Should I respond to the voice? Should I become combative with the voice? The idea is challenging ourselves to rethink who we are by having these deeply personal internal dialogues. A lot of times doubt is a huge player in the creation and the development and the emergence and the manifestation of this thing that I call the shadow voice. Then I also have this voice in my head which I've constructed. I call it the savior voice. And the savior voice is there to give reason and rationale to the shadow voice, to, it's a rebuttal. It's a way of steering shadow's voice in a different direction. And once you start to have this dialogue with shadow voice, you'll find how irrational shadow voice really is. And more that you have these conversations, you will see the shadow voice begin to dissipate and become quieter and less disruptive. And when that happens, you are liberated from that negative self-talk. Now, this is not something you can just snap your fingers and say, I am no longer going to think negatively about myself. And then boom, it happens. Nothing on that scale of self-development happens quickly. And for some, it may happen faster than others. It depends on how much time and effort and thought they put in to self-actualization. But if there's not a lot that's been going on in that direction, shadow voice is going to be particularly strong. But you have to listen and you have to respond. And if there's something that shadow voice says that's very problematic for you, and maybe you even agree with them, with him, her, them, then you have to really listen and then deconstruct what they say and figure out, what can I do to change that? Because sometimes we don't want to hear things about ourselves that are not boosting our self-esteem. We don't want to hear things that are negative. Nobody wants to, right? And a lot of times many of us have grown up and been raised in very volatile situations. And I know me personally spent a lot of time, decades even as an adult, trying to deconstruct a shadow voice because it was so strong. I knew where it came from. And even though I was no longer in that situation for decades, that voice remained. And it still comes up every now and then, but less and less, because when shadow voice says, "Oh, you can't do that," blah 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 blah, I'm like, I can do that. There's no question that I can do that. I can do that. I can be this person. And a lot of times we project shadow voice onto other people. We were talking about perceptions, I believe, in episode 5, the perceptions of other people that they have on us. And I think sometimes we project that shadow voice onto them, so it's even more personified, even though they never said it or thought it, but we think that they did. Kind of a protective, right? We remove the responsibility of that negative self-talk, which is irrational when you think about it, away from us onto other people, and then that becomes kind of where we start to have negative thoughts about them because we think they're having thoughts about us. So then we actually become like a shadow voice, but it's just thoughts about another person, which kind of takes us away from the self-development work that I believe we should all be doing.
How can I train myself to activate the positive savior voice instead of the negative one?
I had an experience. I had an improv class. God, I can't even remember the title of the class. It'll probably come to me. But I do remember this exercise that we did. So we had to write down, I think there was maybe like 12 people. We had to write down all like the kind of a narrative about our fears and our, the things that the negative self-talk kind of stuff. You are a terrible performer. You are never present. All these things that would impede our ability to perform improv in the best way possible. So then once we wrote that down, everyone got in a circle, and they all had like these magazines with kind of dry articles, maybe articles about finance or something. But they would begin to read those out loud, kind of droning on and on and on.
It's 1:30.
We begin to read those, it would drone on and on while we were reading our own narrative out loud. So we hear our voice reading that narrative, but then we hear these other voices that are reading nothing that has anything to do with us. So it almost created this opportunity to be vulnerable, but then the people that are there are distracted from what you're saying because they're reading. So that kind of lightens it up, because if you had everybody staring at you while you're reading your list of vulnerabilities and things, it would be even harder, right? So it creates a little bit of space for that. But what you ultimately leave with is listening to yourself saying those things out loud is very different, right? It's a very different experience from the quiet voices in our head. It just becomes more real, and it sounds more volatile, and it sounds more terrible. But it also offers the opportunity then to bring the savior voice up and start to combat those things because of the illogical nature of it. It's kind of like removing something and looking at it from afar. And then when you see things from a distance, you see it in a different way. That was a very a memorable moment for me in improv, and it was very different from what most people may think happens in some of these workshops. But there's a lot of self-development that goes into those classes.
If society wrongfully measures the value of a person based on occupation, wealth, and power, which attributes do you think we should measure others and ourselves by instead?
There is this concept in sociology, Max Weber's multidimensional social class placement, based upon these three kind of ideas of wealth, power, and prestige being those things that guide us towards different career paths and things that we do with our lives. And some people are chasing wealth. Some people are chasing power. And other people are chasing prestige. Those that chase wealth may ultimately have power because of the wealth, but maybe not. And some people that chase power may have power but no wealth, or they may have both. So those three kind of dimensions even though it's simplistic, I think it's a good way to look at what is driving you towards what you want to do with your life. I think people need to really tap into compassion for other people and, of course, compassion towards themselves. I think people really need to tap into the celebration of knowledge and information. And I'm not talking about that's the chatter on social media. Some of it's helpful, but for me, most of it is not. It doesn't go deeper into ideas that I want to put my head around. I think if people put more time into learning and exploring and not flatlining and not becoming stagnant in their ability to experience life, experience the world, I think those things are admirable. I know a lot of people who, have a strong desire to help other people. So if that's what you desire, then find ways in which you can do that. But measuring ourselves, I've had moments where I kind of measure my own life based upon the material and the power. And I think about all the things that I could have been and all the things I could have done. I realize my own potential probably late in life, but in the same sense, whatever you were working with now and in the past, that is part of what has shaped you into the person that you are. Ultimately, I think that love is that thing that we desire strongly more than anything. And if we become powerful, if we become wealthy or have high prestige, I think to some degree we feel that will increase our likelihood of being loved. Even though we may not extend that love, extending love is important in that reciprocal process. So one cannot just take love from other people. One can accept it and receive it, but at some point that reciprocation has to happen or it begins to fade away. And I'm talking about all kinds of love, not just romantic love, but all kinds of love. And I don't know what your interpretation of one love is, right? The Bob Marley song, One Love, and the idea of one love. But it kind of takes me back to the origin of everything and that one point, that intersection of everything before it exploded and everything that we know of the existence of the universe was formed. I think that love being a part of our experience, that emotion, that vibrational energy, has the same starting point as that point of intersection of everything. So when I hear one love, I think about it's all around us, it runs through us, everybody's connected to it. And depending upon your situation, depending upon your psychological state, you may not feel that. You may not feel the love. And it doesn't have to be about someone telling you they love you. Many people will do things for other people and not say it. And then other people will say it, but they won't do anything. So what is love, It's funny that I got in this trajectory of love, but I can't help it, right? It's a powerful thing. I know many people who really put lots and lots and lots of love into the world. And if you're someone who can receive that, it's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So we're going to end with that. Thank you so much for listening to Seeking Selfdom, Going Deeper. I'm your host, Akello Stone. Hope you keep listening. Peace.